Okay, so today I want to make some comments about the ink and paint process because I took let's see here. This is going to be a little confusing, but maybe what we should do is let me save this and pull up the sort of the prior version of it. Okay, so we started out with this, and I'm quite happy with the feel of it. I want to go back, and there's a few things I want to tighten up. A good example would be right here when our bad guy is climbing the wall. We definitely want some in-betweens in there. But what's got me a little bit concerned, you might say, is that the approach I'm taking sort of says that there's a definite ink process. In other words, we're done with the pencil test, now we have to ink over it, kind of thing. Okay. So then when we do that, excuse me, we do that, in this case, let me just see what I've got here. Yeah. Now, I actually changed the framing on this shot, so maybe this is a crummy example. This would be better. Okay, so the initial pencil sketch is here, and then once I inked over it, I changed the brush that I'm using in the blender grease pencil to a brush that I call I believe super smooth ink. So just to sort of make, let me go to the grease pencil. Okay, so normally when I'm sketching, I'm going to be using this, which has some pressure sensitivity. You can go from almost nothing to a nice bold line. When I do super smooth ink, the thickness is 1 pixel, sensitivity is at 1, and I don't have pressure on. So what that does is, and I'll just switch to this color, which is like a charcoal gray. Now when I ink, I get a really clean, firm line. And let's see here. I've got my smoothing set to 2 with 3 iterations. So there's a lot of smoothing going on with these lines. They are not being subdivided. You'll notice subdivisions are 0. What I find is if you add subdivisions, you just wind up with tons of points in your lines, and all it does is preserve the flaws in the lines that you drew. So, I mean, the whole idea is that I could be drawing a fairly shaky line, and it's going to smooth it out for me. So that's good. Now, having said that, there is a case to be made for, let me just switch to the front view here so I can just pan up in my canvas. Okay, there's a case to be made for saying, well, no, I want a more delicate line, and if I got my hands on the keyboard here, I can quickly press the E key. Oops, sorry, that's set to grab instead of smooth. I can press the E key and just run over that. Okay, so that line, if you look really close, it's got some variability and some shake in it, and it would definitely be the case if I drew the line slowly. Okay, you can see that. So, but literally one pass with the smooth tool smooths that right out. So that's kind of a non-issue. I mean, you're sitting here with your finger on the D key, and then you draw your lines, you know, whatever, and then you just go, you know, one quick smack with the smoothing tool, and it looks fine. So you don't really need the smoothing to be baked into the brush necessarily. All of which is a bit of a side road to what I want to talk about. The problem that I have is that when we go from this to this, you bring that into Krita or however you're going to do your paint, your color. It looks okay. It sits well with a lot of what you see in anime, but for me, the fact is I actually just don't like it that much, especially if the stuff that's on screen, I believe is the case with the next shot, once things start getting smaller, and I know this has been addressed in Blender 2.8, but the more detail you have, the more you don't want these very clean, bold lines. You just don't. What you really want is something more like, let's just go in and start fiddling with it here. Okay. So that was actually, okay, I didn't expect that to happen because I forgot I had done it that way. But for the sake of demonstration, what I'm saying is I really want my ink line to be kind of like that. I want it to have a little bit of layer before I reframed it. In this shot, let's see here, the thickness of the lines was set at 0. So what I actually drew was this. Okay. And I'm like, you know, that looks pretty good to me, you know, and so I took this and I rendered out this frame because I drew it. I thought, okay, it's got that sketchy quality I want. It's got a little more life to it, and plus it's a smooth transition. Instead of saying, you know, we're doing pencil test, pencil test, pencil test, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's ink time. And the overall look of the art, as you could see from what I just did, is very different. Well, that bothers me. What I really want to do is I want to preserve the feeling of those initial pencil drawings. How do we do that? Well, for one thing, by doing the inking with the same brush that I used for the original pencil test, so I've got that ability to have a lighter line or a darker line. If something comes out a little bit jittery, I just hit it with the smoothing tool for literally half a second. Literally half of 1 second solves that problem. So that's a non-issue. Okay, so I took this frame and I just like, okay, well, what's going to happen when it's time to paint it? I brought it into Krita. Okay, and this is what I got. And I'm not going to get into the relative merits of doing painting in Krita versus elsewhere. That's Krita is a very good tool for doing paint. End of story. Frankly, it's a very good tool for doing inking. The reason I don't want to do most of my inking in Krita is because of things like this. I'll show you. And maybe you know this, but if it hasn't occurred to you, this is where it becomes a little bit more of a big deal. Between here and here, she's going to breathe. Okay? With Blender, I can use the proportional editing tool. Let's just turn that on. We'll make sure it's in projected 2D. Okay, I can make her breathe like this. I can just drag the points around. So, as I've said other times, they behave like vectors. And not only can I do that, but I also can do Control-Shift-E, and I can interpolate these frames. So Blender does the animation for me. Okay, there's nothing remotely close to that you can do in Krita. So it really is helpful to be able to do the ink in Blender, but I kind of only want to do the ink in Blender if I can have that more sensitive line that I was talking about. In Krita, that wouldn't be a problem. You would just use probably a brush, something like this. And let me make sure I'm in my correct layer here. And you know, you just doodle away. So you know, you can have a bolder line if that's what you want, or you can have, like I've been talking about, more like a pencil line. So you could do it in Krita. Fact of the matter is, I don't particularly want to, and frankly, if Blender will give me the results, I don't particularly need to. I would rather do the inking in Blender and then bring the image sequences into Krita, deal with the color, and then here's the part where it gets interesting. What I did today was I went ahead and did some coloring this in. Now with Krita, it's kind of nice because I just can move fast. You know, I can take Control, click, and I can say, well, this is not perfect, but I can tighten it up. It's very quick to do so, right? So I can just go in and sort of make this as tight as it needs to be. And in most cases with an anime, it's not like you're going to have to do this on 10,000 frames, because the odds are that that piece of art is going to be held over quite some time. In fact, in the case of this particular sequence, you could in fact isolate this area, or even just this area of the drawing, and animate that so that the part that you do have to paint a lot is just limited to a subset of the entire frame, and everything that repeats, you just um, keep it one frame. I mean, you're dealing with only painting one frame. So I kind of went in here and I was actually, so like this would be a good example of where you can save some time with Krita. Okay, I could fill in a shadow here, but why? I could actually just draw this line right here and then hit the fill tool, and there you go. Okay, so you could uh, with anything, there's things you can criticize about it, but the other thing that's nice about Krita is now that I've got this shadow color, if I want to go in and add some detail to the static shot like that, I can do it. It's quick, it's easy, it's intuitive. So what I'm saying is we've got a really smooth transition between this interactive process of doing the pencil test and making adjustments. It's really kind of fun. I want that uh, quality of work to carry over into the ink and paint stage. And this workflow seems to do that for me. So what's interesting about it is after I painted this, I actually just turned these lines back off, and this right here is what I saved. I saved that and then simply dragged it on top of Blender, which made it a background image. And when I turn on the background image, and by the way, this is, you can see here, this isn't painted as well because this is actually an earlier version of the image I just showed you in Krita. But the point is, I really like the look. And I can make adjustments if I say, well, because, well, for whatever reason, maybe because if this was more of a close-up, I might say, well, I really wanted my ink lines to be a little bolder. Now that the color's in there, I can see that. Well, fine. You know, we can use the tools in Blender to fatten that up if we want to tint the lines a little bit so it's more more of a skin tone, let's say, in the outlines. We can do it, and we wind up with considerably more control. And frankly, in addition to all of that, if we want to, of course, we could go back in Blender and add more detail, you know, do whatever we want to do. So I have to say, at first glance, I think this is probably where I want to be in terms of how I deal with ink and paint. A particularly good example because, like I said, I've fiddled with the thickness of the outlines and things like that. So, you know, and another thing you could do is, because I've got the opacity turned down. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me just correct this right now. Okay, so yeah, let's turn the opacity up. And if you wanted this outline to be a little bolder, if the final animation is, you know, solid, then just duplicate the layer, and it makes the lines a little stronger, bold look. So I think I'm going to proceed on that basis today, and hopefully that will give me a nicer transition from the pencil drawing stage to the inking stage. And obviously, to do this correctly, we would have to have an image sequence of our entire the entire scene would have to be inked and brought back in as an image sequence in the background in order for this to all work. So, and then the problem that you're going to run into is, what if you do all of that and then find out that there's some timing that needs to change or something like that? That is where it's going to become a mess. Frankly, it will become a mess. The only way you could fix that would be to take the scene in Blender, inked and painted, render it all out, bring it back in somewhere else as an image sequence, and then just like cut frames out or whatever to retime it and that sort of thing. So, frankly, what I'm dealing with here is the kind of stuff that OpenToonz deals with pretty well, actually, because you have the ability to like, you could think of this ink line and the paint as being two different layers, right? Okay, so in Open Tunes, that would be two different columns, maybe. They could all be on one column, but they don't have to be. And then you can group those columns and work with them as a single unit and retime them and do all those kinds of things. So frankly, for that reason, I may wind up back up in Open Tunes. But, you know, being really careful to save my work frequently and to know where external images are being saved and all that kind of stuff, because it's bit me in the buns a couple times. So anyway, the upshot of the story today is really quite simply that I like what I'm seeing here. Let me get rid of that ink. I really like that look right there. Even though the paint really needs to be finished up in Krita, which is kind of what I was doing here. So anyway, I'm gonna stop there and actually probably start a new video where I'm doing the ink and paint process. I'm streaming. I've been streaming this whole time. I thought I was recording, not streaming, so that means this is probably uploading to YouTube even as we speak. That's funny. Alright, so more later, huh?